what in your mind made you think that this man got better and could do the job? Like, you degenerate. The cervical disease, the lumbar disease, the back disease, they're degenerative conditions. They will never get better. Will they stabilize? Yes, but nobody goes from, being at the level they were and then all of a sudden they're so much better. Not when you have the significant level of 3 past surgeries, motorcycle accidents, and everything else that he's been through. And that, let alone you didn't talk about the medications that he's possibly on, the extensive injections that he's been through, the physical therapy that he's been through. This man's done everything. So he's obviously going to love to work, and it's borderline just disgusting that they would make that kind of decision. But that's the nice thing to give hope to people about doing an appeal, because eventually you got to someone who looked at it and said, from Prudential at the higher level appeal, said this has got to end. Hi, I'm attorney Greg Dell, joined by attorneys Caesar Gavidia and Jessup. And guys, today we're back again in our studio to talk about some of the cases we've resolved in the last couple weeks. And Caesar, I know you had a really great one against Prudential. So let's talk about the background of this case, what you did for the client, and then some tips that some of our potential clients and viewers can take away from this to help protect their disability benefits. So start with why this person was disabled.
So
denied, I should say.
Sure.
Sorry about that.
No, it's our client was a former wellhead technician, and back in 2022, he became, actually 2020, he became disabled from his highly laborious physical occupation. Being a wellhead technician is considered one of those heavy in terms of physical labor jobs, and he had been struggling for a long time from cervical and lower lumbar spinal problems. Really complex issues, had 3 lumbar surgeries, and after each of those times went back to work. And then in 2017 he was in a motorcycle accident and went back to work after that for a little while, and after some time just couldn't continue doing his really heavy physical job, and filed for disability with Prudential. That's who the employer had as their group disability insurer. And they actually had approved him. And they paid him out for 24 months. And as soon as those 24 months was up, they cut him off. They determined, hey, we think you can go and perform a sedentary occupation. He attempted the first time to try to appeal the decision on his own, and they had overturned it and approved it for a short time, and then they denied it again. Then he came to us. We put together a real comprehensive appeal. He'd actually already been approved for Social Security disability. We included a lot of the findings and independent medical reports from the Social Security file, and they overturned it. They paid him for a little while. They denied it again. We submitted another appeal, won that appeal with additional evidence from a VOC expert, from a functional capacity evaluator. They overturned it. Then a few months later, they denied it again.
No.
And we appealed it again, and we won it again. So over the course, and this person has never gotten any better. It's progressively gotten worse for him. We had him go through a second functional capacity evaluation that not only confirmed and supported the findings of the original one, but showed that there was even more progressive degeneration. And this time, and what's interesting in the approval letter, I don't know if this appeal reviewer, the light bulb went off there, because she went through and cited all of the reasons in the approval letter, which you usually don't see. Usually they just say you're approved, and cited all the reasons why they were approving him in that functional capacity evaluation, showing how significantly physically impaired he was. They felt he could go back, in the second denial, that he could go back to doing an occupation that was sedentary, that could earn him between $18 and $20 an hour. So we consistently provided evidence that he couldn't. And finally, that third reviewer went through her approval letter, hopefully now, so that if anybody else puts hands on his file again, they can go back and see all the reasons that they've approved him, and now will hopefully continue paying him for as long as the policy provides benefits, which is usually up through age 67.
It sounds incredible that they basically tortured this guy. I mean, 4 different denials. I think you said he had 3 surgeries. and it was cervical and lumbar issues.
Cervical and lumbar.
So for people who don't know the technical terms, neck and back issues.
Right.
And Steve, as you know, when people have surgery, it doesn't mean, hey, you're perfect, go back to normal. It's kind of like a stop the bleeding type mentality. A lot of people don't realize this. When you have neck and back surgery, it's done for two reasons. Number one, it's usually done because the pain is so bad you can't take it anymore. But the other thing is because of possible some kind of spinal cord impairment or nerve root impairment that could lead to possible paralysis. So it's done to stabilize the spine, not necessarily to make it where you can, lift, bend, better flexion, better extension. It's done to stabilize you and get you under control. So it's always sad, and we see it every single day, where the disability company goes, oh, you had surgery. Our little return to work guideline book that we have says within 6 weeks you should be at full recovery. But what does that even mean? Full recovery to do what? So how do you deal with that in your claims, much like Caesar had to, where a lot of our clients have surgeries, and a lot of times we see these denials come, 6-8 weeks later?
Well, the one big thing, especially when it comes to surgeries in the back and anything in the back or neck, I always feel that neck is a higher level of severity because doctors are very hesitant to go into the neck unless it needs to be done. But I think in a real big situation here is, that recovery rate, you recover from surgery and doctor may release you to levels of activity. Doesn't mean you're released to go to work. And not for nothing, we all know is that when you have one surgery and your clients, and since more are going to happen, other areas have become structurally weak, and just even the natural degeneration of the spine for aging, normal aging, right? You could have a healthy spine, no problems that you're aware of, but it's not going to be the same in your 40s as it was in your 20s. So the best he could have ever been was after the surgery. There's still reasonable expectation of going down. And I think in a situation like yours, because we've represented a lot of people who have these, well-paying, physical labor jobs. In the oil industry, I've had a handful. What are the transferable skills? And a lot of times they live in remote areas. There's not a lot of occupational ability, but then what are the transferable skills when they've been in that profession for so long? So that's always a kind of a situation to argue and attack. It is surprising, Prudential so many times, maybe at this point they may at least try to say, hey, we're going to be on the hook and offer you some level of like a lump sum settlement.
But this is a disturbing denial, because I always like to break this down and look at the human who's on the other side of handling this claim. You have a guy, your client, Caesar, who's had 3 surgeries. I don't know whether or not he ever filed a claim back then, but he went back to work every single time. That in itself is remarkable. You have a person who's saying, I don't want to be on disability. Most of our clients don't want to be on disability. You take a significant income reduction when you go on disability. Here you have your client who's fought back 3 times to go to work, works through it, physical job, as physical as it possibly gets, as we know from representing many people who have his occupation. Then he has a motorcycle accident. That's 2017. We're here in 2025. So he went back for years after that. Didn't have his initial claim, it sounds like, until sometime around 2022, give or take, something like that. And they pay him and go, yeah, you can't do your physical job. Well, obviously they recognize he had something wrong. But then all of a sudden, like you were saying, Steve, they think, oh, you can just go do a desk job.
Right. And I think it's because of when they do the VOC assessments, they don't just look at, well, the policy states, they have to consider their education, training, experience, and even their financial ability to earn up to, 60% or whatever the policy in terms of that gainful or financial threshold of their pre-disability earnings. And when that bar is between $18 and $20 an hour, mind you, with being like Steve noted, with the well-paid wellhead, oil, heavy physical demand jobs, working in the oil industry, a lot of their compensation doesn't just come from their base salary. It comes from a lot of the overtime, other employee benefits and things that kick in. There's a lot of other benefits that kick them up into like a 6-figure, salary or 6-figure annual income area. And what the insurance company is just looking at is what was their base salary? What was their pre-disability earnings based on what the employer is reporting as their base salary? So that threshold is $18 to $20 an hour. They think they can go back to doing. In his case, they said he could do a service clerk, he could be a dispatcher, but basically saying you can sit. But the evidence that we had submitted was very supportive and indicative that he can't do prolonged standing, can't do prolonged sitting. I mean, those are the things that are really challenging and difficult and uncomfortable for him to do.
What's so horrendous to me, and it's been a trend lately with Prudential, I mean, we see it. We see the denials every single week. We see hundreds to thousands of them every year, is that whoever even got the last denial, which was now the fourth denial, what in your mind made you think that this man got better and could do the job? Like, you degenerate. The cervical disease, the lumbar disease, the back disease, they're degenerative conditions. They will never get better. Will they stabilize? Yes, but nobody goes from, being at the level they were, and then all of a sudden they're so much better. Not when you have the significant level of 3 past surgeries, motorcycle accidents, and everything else that he's been through. And that, let alone, you didn't talk about the medications that he's possibly on, the extensive injections that he's been through, the physical therapy that he's been through. This man's done everything. So he's obviously someone who loved to work, and it's borderline just disgusting that they would make that kind of decision. But that's the nice thing to give hope to people about doing an appeal, because eventually you got to someone who looked at it and said, from Prudential at the higher level appeal, said this has got to end, and documented appropriately based upon all of the significant evidence that you were able to put together for the claimant. So, great job that you did on this, and we can only hope that now this client, who still has many years to collect, and you'll continue to do whatever you can to protect his benefits, will not run into some rogue person over at Prudential who's going to say, no, our doctors reviewed the file on paper, never even bothered to examine you or talk to you or look at you and decide to cut you off. But hopefully, he should be stable now and staying on claim. So if you're someone out there who has a Prudential long-term disability insurance claim, feel free to reach out to Caesar, Stephen, myself. No matter where you live in the country, we're available to assist you, and we'll always provide you with a free initial phone consultation.